From a hit and run that injured a pregnant woman to being caught using performance-enhancing drugs, this is why everyone hates Jon Jones. Jon Bones Jones is unquestionably one of the best fighters in the UFC, but did you know that he's been arrested 5 times? Jon had his first run-in with the authorities months after becoming the youngest champion in UFC history. Back in 2011, Albuquerque police discovered Jones was driving on a suspended license. He was taken into custody in the parking lot of a strip club. You heard that right. The charges were dropped, but Jon didn't quite learn his lesson. Just 6 months later, he crashed his $100,000 Bentley and refused a sobriety test. The troubled fighter cozied up in a Broome County jail cell before bailing himself out. Bones later pled guilty to DUI, but barely received a slap on the wrist. Fans tried to ignore the fighter's sketchy behavior, yet the arrest severely impacted his reputation. But Nike didn't seem to pay any mind, as they proceeded to sign Jones to an endorsement deal worth millions. The 24-year-old fighter was en route to becoming a UFC superstar until 2019. Jones was involved in a moronic hit-and-run. Not only did he flee the scene of the accident, but Jones injured a pregnant woman who drove the other vehicle. Hours later, Jon turned himself in and faced some serious repercussions. UFC President Dana White stripped Jones of his championship belt and suspended him indefinitely. It seemed like his career in mixed martial arts was over. But thanks to his public image and a favorable plea bargain, Jones was only sentenced to 18 months probation. Jones obviously violated his parole, getting involved in a street race in New Mexico. Once again, Bones escaped without serving jail time. He was ordered to attend anger management and some much-needed driver improvement courses. You'd expect him to have gotten his shit together, yet a police warrant was issued for Jones's arrest. A complaint filed by a strip club employee alleged that Bones placed her in a headlock and touched her genitals without consent. Once the news broke, fans began to turn on the reigning middleweight champion. The spiraling UFC star missed his court hearing, but there's nothing money can't fix. Jones rescheduled his court appearance and paid his bond in cash. The case was dismissed, allowing Jones to proceed with his light heavyweight title defense against Dominick Reyes. Despite his inexcusable actions outside of the octagon, another reason why the UFC community hates Jon Jones is his reputation as a dirty fighter. Many believe that his regular use of cheap shots has tarnished his legacy. Former rival Quinton "Rampage" Jackson labeled Bones the dirtiest fighter ever. Jackson followed up his comments saying, "If you're doing anything good for him, he's going to poke you in the eye." Some serious allegations coming from one of the best fighters in recent years. Bones has also been accused of using a number of dirty tactics to claim his victories. He's certainly no stranger to the accidental eye poke, but there's truly no place in the UFC for his illegal knee kicks. When he enters the octagon, Jones will do whatever it takes to defeat his opponent, whether it is a legal move or not. Rampage Jackson noted, "He's kicking you right on the kneecap. I think that should be banned. My knee is still messed up from that fight because it hyperextended. He kicked it all the way back." Referees can only do so much, as it's extremely difficult to track every action that happens during a fight. But Jones seems to get away with a number of illegal shots. One of Bones' strong suits is his ability to dominate his opponents on the ground. Bones' signature move is his powerful and iconic spinning elbow. While undoubtedly an awesome-looking move, most of the elbows he lands are illegal. Jones just happens to strike his opponents in the back of the head, which is both illegal and incredibly dangerous. When he steps into the octagon, he's looking to use anything and everything to emerge victorious. More often than not, he seems to resort to some pretty cheap blows. In fact, Jones's only career loss was the result of an illegal elbow. Back in 2009, Bones was undefeated and squared off against underdog fighter Matt Hamill. After several rounds demolishing Hamill, referee Steve Mazzagatti was forced to stop the fight. Jones threw several illegal 12-6 elbows, meaning he struck his opponent in a dangerous and unsportsmanlike downward motion. The prohibited elbows fired at Hamill dislocated the poor guy's shoulder, preventing him from continuing the fight. Despite obliterating Hamill and being moments away from a knockout, Bones was disqualified and suffered his first defeat of his career. When it comes to reasons for hating Jon Jones, none may be greater than the preferential treatment he receives from the UFC. Thanks to substance abuse issues and run-ins with the police, the controversial fighter has served 3 spells away from the octagon. His first moratorium came after the aforementioned hit-and-run incident. where the association stripped his title belt and dropped him from the active roster for 6 months. John lost a huge portion of his followers who thought his career was done and dusted. Yet Bones returned to competition after a 15-month absence from the UFC. He was set to face former champion Daniel Cormier in a highly anticipated bout. It seemed like Dana White was grasping at straws, attempting to keep his cash cow fighter in the conversation. The UFC world believed Dana White was pulling the strings, reducing John's suspension to help drive up the ratings. And it was extremely suspicious that the association was willing to overlook John's actions and plop him right back into a championship bout. Fighters were disheartened and called out the shady behavior. They felt he was provided with an easy path to reclaim his belt, without having to go through the traditional channels of becoming a champ. But just a couple of months after being reinstated, Bones was served with yet another year-long suspension. After failing a pre-fight drug test in 2016, the United States Doping Association discovered trace amounts of cocaine in the fighter's system. They slapped John with a number of fines in addition to his 1-year break from action. Johns was again stripped of his championship title, adding insult to injury. He became the first fighter in UFC history to have their title belt taken away twice. Once reinstated, there was no arguing. Jones was Dana White's most prized fighter. Dana was willing to sacrifice his own reputation as well as the UFC's, doing whatever it took to give John another shot in the spotlight. But John's third spell away from the octagon truly takes the cake. Fast forward to the rescheduled Cormier vs. Jones fight. Bones practically murdered his rival. He looked leaner and meaner than ever before, manhandling Cormier and reclaiming his championship belt. But a post-weigh-in urine sample sullied John's return to the octagon. Jones tested positive for a performance-enhancing drug called Turnabol. The anabolic steroid is among the UFC's list of banned substances, and was proof that John had an unfair advantage in the fight. Consequently, the USADA overturned the result of the fight and deemed it a no contest. Jones was initially issued a 48-month suspension. That's 4 freaking years. But of course, thanks to his relationship with Dana White, his appeal against the ruling was successful, and his time off was reduced to just 15 months. Many current fighters are convinced that John is still juicing. Thanks to a seamless transition to the heavyweight class, the UFC community is rightfully suspicious. Jones packed on over 20 pounds of muscle to qualify for his ambitious conversion to the heavyweight division. But his dominant performances over some of the best heavyweights of all time has led to a number of recent PED allegations. Who knows if Jones was regularly doping during the early stages of his career? Dana White could have easily covered for his favorite UFC fighter. And he's got all the reason to do so, as Jones sells out arenas and racks up the pay-per-view purchases. Science tells us that John's swift transition to the 205-pound weight class is nearly impossible. While not quite out of the realm of possibilities, all signs point toward John doping yet again. It truly feels like Jones is gaming the system, getting away with some serious violations both inside and outside of the octagon. So, from being caught using performance-enhancing drugs to a hit-and-run that injured a pregnant woman, that is why everyone hates Jon Jones.